and in 1837 William Henry Aspinwall's fortune was estimated to be greater than Cornelius Vanderbilt's. Post-China trade ventures. Opium. From the Lodge to the Den 267 included building America's oldest steamship line and several railroads, and, like most other China traders, participating in philanthropy. Aspinwall was considered both an honest and a pious man, and has been referred to as a visionary. He was a co-founder of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and led America in new adventures around the world. While he lived quietly in New York, Aspinwall claimed that his Panama Railroad, which was erected before the famous canal, could be built in 6 months. Not having traveled there himself, he didn't realize that the first 13 miles went through dense jungles and impenetrable swamps filled with poisonous insects and snakes. From mosquitoes and sandflies to alligators and other hazards, the area was known as a pest hole from the days of Spanish exploration. General Grant, who visited the construction site, described the conditions of the rainy season as beyond belief. 13 The conditions took their toll on the workers, who often toiled in mud up to their necks, fighting off the swarming insects from sunrise to sunset. Sickness and disease including cholera, yellow fever, smallpox, and dysentery claimed many lives, as did harsh treatment similar to what was enacted on slaves. A commonly told story holds that there was a dead Irishman for every railroad tie. Howland and Aspinwall declared the death toll at 1,000, but estimates actually run up to 6,000. Chinese workers, called coolies, who did hard labor for low wages, were imported. 800 arrived, 200 survived. Many committed suicide by hanging themselves, paying companions to stab or shoot them, or simply drowning themselves in the ocean. Aspinwall was in New York at the time, where, ironically to modern sensibilities, he helped created the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. Like their Boston counterparts, New York's first families used marriage to ensure that their wealth and prominence would remain intact. Harriet Howland married James Roosevelt, President Franklin Roosevelt's great-grandfather, and Mary Aspinwall married Isaac Roosevelt, the same president's grandfather. The son of Mary Aspinwall and Isaac Roosevelt, James Roosevelt, married Rebecca Howland. 268 From the sacred to the profane. The Roosevelts and the Delanos. The Roosevelts and the Delanos were among America's first Dutch families. Claes Martensen van Roosevelt arrived in America before 1649 and died in 1660. Like John Jacob Astor, Roosevelt's only son, Nicholas, got his start in the fur business. He in turn had 2 sons who split the family into 2 lines. The Oyster Bay, New York line, from which President Teddy Roosevelt was born, and the Hyde Park, New York line of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The Oyster Bay branch got most of its wealth from the merchant business. The Hyde Park branch invested primarily in real estate. Membership in the elite societies of the day, including Masonry, and intermarriage increased the Roosevelt family fortune. Isaac Roosevelt married into a sugar trading family, which often implied the triangular trade of sugar, molasses, and slaves. After the Molasses Act of 1733, anyone who wouldn't smuggle couldn't survive. The Roosevelts survived and prospered. 14 and Isaac's brother James joined the business. Isaac became close with William Walton, and both were involved in founding the Bank of New York. James would also make a connection to the Waltons when he married Maria Walton. Other Roosevelts married Howlands and Aspinwalls, which is how they were introduced to the China trade. The Howland and Aspinwall families were also active in building clipper ships and later in the steamship and railroad businesses. By the 1820s the Roosevelt clan were more than just wealthy, they were also very well connected. James Roosevelt, son of Rebecca Aspinwall Roosevelt, sat on boards with the Vanderbilts and J. Pierpont Morgan. James Roosevelt's son James Rosie Roosevelt became engaged to Helen Schermerhorn Astor. At their engagement party, one of the guests in attendance was Sir Delano. The Delanos were another of America's first families. Descendants of a Huguenot family by the name of Delanoyer, who fled Holland for America, they arrived on the fortune in 1621. Philip Delanoyer came to America at age 19, and became a Massachusetts landowner. Opium. From the Lodge to the Den 269 modified the spelling of his surname to Delano, and married into the family of John and Priscilla Alden. Philip's son, Thomas Lano, married the Alden's daughter, also named Priscilla, although the couple was fined £10 for engaging in intercourse before the wedding. Farther down the family tree, Warren Lano, Franklin's grandfather, made his fortune in the opium business, starting through the Grinnell firm. Warren's daughter Sarah Delano became the mother of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Sarah's sister Dora married DeForbes, and their sister Rennie married Fred Hitch, a Russell & Company associate in Shanghai. The Delano family seemed to gravitate toward the sea and the trading business. Warren Lano was an associate of James Roosevelt's father, and was a partner in Russell, Sturgis & Company, also known as Russell & Company at various stages. Warren was the China representative, and owned a mansion in Macau. For a while he retired from opium trading, and sank his fortune into New York real estate and coal and copper mines in Pennsylvania and Tennessee. In August 1857 the failure of the Ohio Life Insurance and Trust started a domino effect that wiped out many banks. All but one bank in New York suspended specie payment. By the end of the year, 5,000 businesses had failed, tens of thousands of workers had lost their homes and jobs, and people starved and froze to death both in the cities and in the coal towns. While his workers died, Warren lived in Algonac, his estate, complete with high-ceilinged rooms with rosewood furniture, teakwood screens, potted plants, and Buddhist bells. Although Warren Lano suffered no loss of creature comforts, his net worth suffered dearly. He was desperate to keep his status, and decided to go back to China and the drug smuggling business. It was the simplest way to rebuild his fortune. It would be denied in these later years that the opium he bought and shipped was intended for the tremendously profitable market provided by addicts, writes Kenneth Davis, who mentions specifically that it was opium, and not tea, that brought wealth along with a touch of notoriety. 15 By this time the New England drug smugglers were bringing the drug to American addicts. 270 From the sacred to the profane. The family later claimed that the opium Warren brought to America was for the relief of the Civil War wounded, but he returned to China in 1859, which predated the Civil War by 2 years. The future President Franklin Roosevelt announced his engagement to Eleanor in Grandfather Warren's room, surrounded by China trade regalia. More prominent than his cousin Teddy was, Franklin took his role in Masonry seriously, becoming active in the Holland No. 8 Lodge in New York City, and a Scottish Rite Temple in Albany. Theodore Roosevelt is famous, of course, as a United States President, and for leading the charge on San Juan Hill. Roosevelt's public persona depicts him as a trust buster, fighting the giant Standard Oil and mediating mining strikes. Despite his Masonic membership, however, he was far from egalitarian. He was also closely tied to big business, and was able to raise the necessary corporate donations for his candidacy. His trust-busting activities, though, would leave him at odds with the Rockefeller and Carnegie interests. The 26th President of the United States is on record as being racial elitist with an attitude that bordered on favoring ethnic cleansing. He has been quoted as saying, "Someday we will realize that the prime duty, the inescapable duty of the good citizen of the right type is to leave his or her blood behind him in the world, and that we have no business to permit the perpetuation of citizens of the wrong type." He also said, "I wish very much that the wrong people could be prevented entirely from breeding. Criminals should be sterilized and feeble-minded persons forbidden to leave offspring." 16. While Teddy was crying out against the unwashed masses, the country was gripped by fear of anyone who was foreign Chinese, African, Italian, or Eastern European. The Eugenics Records Office, ERO, was created and funded by the wealthiest people of the day, to reduce the population of the poor. The ERO, which was funded by John D. Rockefeller,